This is my true story. I was married to my wife for 20 years and supported her through everything while she built her successful career. But as she became more successful, she started treating me with insult and calling me a failure. Last Tuesday, I suggested we take a vacation with our savings, and she exploded. She said I was a loser who never accomplished anything and that she was embarrassed to call me her husband. I was so pained that I decided to teach her a lesson. Before I tell you what I did next, tell us where you are watching from, and please subscribe so more people like me can hear my story. I married my wife when we were both young and struggling to make ends meet. We were in our mid-20s with nothing but dreams and determination. She was working as an assistant at a small marketing firm, and I had a steady job as an accountant at a local company. We lived in a tiny apartment and drove old cars and counted every dollar we spent. But we were happy, or at least I thought we were happy. We talked about building a life together and supporting each other through whatever challenges came our way. I supported her ambitions from the very beginning of our marriage. When she wanted to go back to school to get her MBA, I worked extra hours to help pay for her tuition. When she wanted to quit her job to start her own consulting business, I encouraged her, even though it meant we would be living on my single income for a while. When her first business venture failed and she lost the money we had invested, I told her it was okay and that we would rebuild. I never complained or made her feel bad about the risks she took. I worked steady, reliable jobs that paid decent salaries but were never particularly exciting or prestigious. I was an accountant and then a financial analyst and eventually a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm. My career was stable and predictable. I made enough money to support us comfortably, but I was never going to be rich or famous from my work. I was okay with that because I believed marriage was about partnership, not competition. I thought what mattered was that we were building a life together. My contributions to our household went largely unnoticed as the years passed. I paid the mortgage and the utilities and made sure our bills were covered on time. I handled our taxes and managed our investments and took care of all the financial details that kept our life running smoothly. But my wife never acknowledged these contributions because they were quiet and behind the scenes. She was focused on her own career and her own achievements, and she seemed to forget that my steady income was what allowed her to take risks with her business. I believed marriage meant partnership and that quiet strength mattered as much as loud achievement. I thought being the stable, reliable person who kept everything running was just as important as being the flashy, successful entrepreneur. I thought my wife valued what I brought to our relationship even if she did not say it out loud. I thought our marriage was built on mutual respect and appreciation for different strengths. I was wrong about all of that. As her career finally started to take off, she became more successful and more confident. Her consulting business grew, and she started landing bigger clients and making more money. She hired employees and rented office space and became known in her industry. She started getting invited to speak at conferences and getting featured in business publications. Her success was real and impressive, and I was genuinely proud of her. I thought her success was our success because we were partners. But as her career flourished, my steady, reliable job started to look boring and inadequate by comparison. She would come home excited about closing a big deal or landing a new client, and I would share news about finishing a quarterly report or helping a colleague with a complicated tax issue. My accomplishments sounded small next to hers. My salary seemed modest compared to what she was earning. My career trajectory looked flat while hers was shooting upward. I never felt competitive or jealous about her success. I was happy for her and proud of what she had accomplished. I thought we were a team and that her wins were our wins. I thought she appreciated that I had supported her through the difficult early years and that I continued to provide stability while she took risks. I thought she saw value in what I contributed even if it was not as glamorous as what she was doing. But I was completely wrong. Her success had not made her grateful for my support. It had made her contemptuous of my perceived failures. As her career flourished and mine stayed steady in the same reliable pattern, her tone toward me shifted from partnership to contempt. The change happened gradually over several years, but looking back, I can see exactly when it started. She began making small comments about my lack of ambition. She would ask why I was not trying to get promoted or why I was satisfied staying in the same position year after year. She would suggest I should be networking more or looking for opportunities at bigger companies. Her questions sounded like concern, but they felt like criticism. She started comparing me to her colleagues' successful husbands at dinner parties and social events. She would talk about how so-and-so's husband just got promoted to vice president, or how another husband started his own company, or how someone else bought a vacation home. She would say these things while looking at me like she was disappointed I had not achieved similar things. She never said it directly, but the implication was clear. I was not measuring up to the other husbands in her social circle. She introduced me to new people as just my husband, with a dismissive wave of her hand. Not as her partner or her spouse, or even by my name half the time. Just my husband, like I was an accessory she was obligated to bring along. The way she said it made me feel insignificant and forgettable. She would then immediately pivot to talking about herself and her business and her accomplishments. I stood next to her at these events, feeling invisible while she networked and socialized with people who were important to her career. She rolled her eyes when I spoke at gatherings or tried to contribute to conversations. If I told a story or shared an opinion, she would make a face like she was embarrassed by me. Sometimes she would interrupt me mid-sentence to change the subject to something she found more interesting. Sometimes she would make a joke at my expense to get a laugh from the group. I started speaking less and less at social events because I knew whatever I said would be met with her visible disapproval. She treated my presence like furniture that was necessary but unremarkable. I was there because married people bring their spouses to events. I was there because it would look strange if she always showed up alone. But I was not there because she valued my company or wanted me beside her. I was just an object that filled a social requirement. She would barely speak to me at these events and would spend the entire time talking to other people who she found more interesting or useful. The contempt extended to how she treated me at home as well. She would come home from work and barely acknowledge me. She would talk on the phone with her business partners or clients for hours while I made dinner. When I tried to tell her about my day, she would half listen while looking at her phone or her laptop. She made it clear that what I had to say was not important compared to her work and her life. She stopped asking for my opinion on decisions that affected both of us. She would make major purchases or commitments without consulting me. She would plan trips or events and inform me rather than discussing them with me. She treated me like a child or a subordinate rather than an equal partner. She had all the power in our relationship because she made more money and had more success, and she made sure I knew it. She stopped showing me affection or appreciation. There were no more thank yous for handling the finances or taking care of household tasks. There were no more compliments or words of encouragement. There was just indifference and occasional bursts of criticism. She looked at me like I was a disappointment and a burden. She made me feel like I was lucky she stayed married to me despite my obvious inadequacy. I endured this treatment for years, hoping things would improve. I thought maybe she was just stressed from work and would eventually remember who I was and what we had built together. I thought maybe her contempt was temporary and would fade once her career stabilized. But it only got worse as time went on. The more successful she became, the more she looked down on me. And I stayed quiet and accepted it because I still loved her and I still hoped she loved me too. Last Tuesday evening, I made a suggestion that seemed innocent and reasonable to me. We had been married for 20 years, and we had never taken a real vacation together. We had taken a few weekend trips here and there, but nothing substantial. I had been looking at our savings account, and I noticed we had accumulated a decent amount of money. I thought it would be nice to use some of that money to take a week-long vacation somewhere relaxing. Maybe a beach resort or a mountain cabin, just the two of us reconnecting away from work and stress. I brought it up during dinner while we were eating at the kitchen table. I said I had been thinking we should take a vacation with our savings and do something special together. I suggested we could go somewhere we had always talked about visiting. I thought she might be excited about the idea, or at least open to discussing it. Instead, her face immediately darkened, and I could see anger rising in her expression. I knew instantly I had said something wrong, but I did not understand what. She set down her fork and looked at me with pure venom in her eyes. She said a vacation, and her voice was dripping with sarcasm and contempt. She said with what money, and before I could answer, she continued. She said with your pathetic salary. She emphasized the word pathetic like she had been thinking it for years and was finally saying it out loud. She said we both knew I barely contributed anything financially compared to what she made. She said the savings account I was talking about was funded almost entirely by her income, not mine. Then she said the words that would destroy our marriage permanently. She said, "You are a loser who never accomplished anything." She said it slowly and deliberately, making sure every word landed. She said I had wasted 20 years doing nothing with my career while she built a successful business. She said I had no ambition and no drive and no achievements worth mentioning. She said looking at me was a constant reminder of mediocrity and failure. She stood up from the table and grabbed her designer purse from the counter. She said she was embarrassed to call me her husband. She said when people asked what I did for a living, she wanted to lie because the truth was so pathetic. She said her colleagues and friends all had successful, accomplished spouses, and she was stuck with me. She said she regretted not leaving me years ago when she first realized I would never amount to anything. Her words hung in the air like poison, filling the room and making it hard to breathe. I sat there in complete shock, unable to respond or defend myself. 20 years of marriage, and this was what she really thought of me. 20 years of supporting her and loving her and being her partner, and she saw me as nothing but a loser who embarrassed her. The cruelty of her words was beyond anything I could have imagined. This was not frustration or temporary anger. This was contempt that had been building for years. She walked toward the door and said she was going out for drinks with friends. Real friends, she said. People who actually did something with their lives. She said she needed to be around successful people for a while to remind herself what ambition looked like. She said she would be back late and I should not wait up for her. Then she walked out and slammed the door behind her, leaving me sitting alone at the table with the remains of our dinner. I sat there for a long time after she left, trying to process what had just happened. The woman I had loved for 20 years had just told me I was worthless. She had called me a loser and said she was embarrassed by me. She had made it clear she had no respect for me or anything I had contributed to our marriage. And she had done it all with such casual cruelty, like she was simply stating obvious facts that everyone already knew. That night, while she was out drinking with her successful friends, I sat in my study and made a decision that would change both our lives forever. I was done being treated like garbage by someone who had no idea who I really was or what I was really worth. What my wife did not know, and what I had never told her, was that 15 years ago, my uncle died and left me a substantial inheritance. My uncle had been a successful businessman who never married or had children. He had always liked me and appreciated that I visited him regularly and stayed in touch even when he moved to another state for retirement. When he died, I was surprised to learn he had left me a significant amount of money in his will. The inheritance came with one very specific condition that was outlined in the trust documents my uncle had created. The condition was that I had to keep the money secret and never tell anyone about it, including my spouse. My uncle had seen too many families torn apart by inheritance money and people changing once they knew someone had wealth. He wanted me to have financial security, but he also wanted to protect me from people who might treat me differently if they knew I had money. The trust required that I invest the inheritance wisely and live modestly and never let anyone know about the money until I truly needed it. My uncle defined truly needed as a major emergency or a situation where revealing the money would significantly improve my life or protect me from harm. The trust was legally binding, and if I violated the confidentiality requirement, I would lose access to the funds. So I kept the secret even from my wife. I had built that initial inheritance into $1.8 million through careful stock investments and real estate purchases over 15 years. I spent hours researching companies and market trends. I bought stocks when they were undervalued and sold them when they peaked. I purchased small rental properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods and sold them years later for substantial profits. I reinvested the earnings and watched the money grow steadily year after year. All of this wealth was held under a separate legal entity that my wife knew nothing about. The trust had been set up as an LLC with a generic business name that did not connect to me personally. The account statements went to a P.O. box I had rented specifically for this purpose. I checked the accounts online using a separate computer at the library, so there was no trace of it on our home devices. I had been meticulous about keeping this part of my life completely hidden. I lived modestly by choice, not because of necessity. I could have afforded a much more expensive lifestyle, but I chose to live within the means of my regular salary. I did this partly because the trust required it, and partly because I wanted to see who my wife really was. I wanted to know if she would love me and respect me, even when she thought I was just a regular accountant with a modest income. The answer had become painfully clear over the years. My wife had no idea that the man she called a loser was actually worth nearly $2 million. She had no idea that I had more money than she had made in her entire career. She had no idea that while she was showing off her success and looking down on my pathetic salary, I was quietly building wealth that dwarfed her income. She thought she was the successful one in our marriage, and I was the failure holding her back. She spent her income on designer clothes and expensive dinners and luxury items to project an image of success. Meanwhile, I was investing and growing wealth that she would never see. She bragged to her friends about her business accomplishments while married to a man she considered mediocre. She had no idea the mediocre husband she mocked had achieved more financial success than she could imagine. The irony of the situation would have been funny if it was not so painful. She had built her entire sense of superiority on the belief that she was more successful than me. She had justified her contempt by telling herself I was a loser who never accomplished anything. But the truth was, I had accomplished something she had not. I had built substantial wealth quietly and carefully, without needing to brag about it or show it off. And now that she had finally pushed me too far, she was about to learn exactly what she had lost. That night, while my wife slept peacefully in our bed after insulting me and going out drinking with her friends, I sat alone in my study, staring at account statements on my computer screen. The statements showed $1.8 million in assets she had never seen and never suspected existed. I looked at the numbers and thought about 20 years of marriage. 20 years of supporting her dreams and enduring her growing contempt. 20 years of hoping she would eventually see my value and treat me with respect. I thought about all the times I had made excuses for her behavior, all the times I told myself she was just stressed from work or tired from a difficult week, all the times I convinced myself that deep down she still loved me and appreciated me, even if she did not show it. I had been lying to myself for years because I wanted to believe our marriage could be saved. But her words tonight had shattered that delusion completely. She had called me a loser who never accomplished anything. She had said she was embarrassed to call me her husband. She had made it clear that in her eyes I was worthless and pathetic. And she had said all of this while living in a house I helped pay for and enjoying a lifestyle my financial contributions made possible. She had no idea that the man she mocked had more money than she did. She had no idea that I had been quietly successful while she was loudly mediocre. I realized that my uncle had been right to include the confidentiality requirement in the trust. He had wanted to protect me from people who would treat me differently if they knew I had money. My wife was exactly the kind of person he had been worried about. She valued success and status and wealth above everything else. If she had known about my inheritance from the beginning, she might have treated me better, but only because of the money, not because of who I was as a person. The fact that she treated me with contempt while thinking I was just a regular accountant told me everything I needed to know about her character. She did not love me for who I was. She looked down on me because she thought I had not achieved enough. Her respect was conditional on success and status, not on the actual substance of our relationship or the years we had spent building a life together. I thought about staying and trying to work things out. I thought about revealing the money and watching her reaction. Would she suddenly respect me if she knew I was wealthy? Would she apologize for years of contempt once she realized I was worth nearly $2 million? Probably. But that would prove she never valued me as a person. She only valued what I could provide financially or how I made her look to other people. 20 years I had endured her growing contempt, hoping love would return to our marriage. 20 years I had been patient and supportive and faithful. 20 years I had believed that being a good husband meant enduring difficult times and working through problems. But there was a difference between working through normal marriage problems and accepting abuse from someone who fundamentally did not respect you. I realized that patience was not always a virtue. Sometimes patience was just another word for allowing yourself to be mistreated. Sometimes staying in a bad situation did not make you noble, it just made you a victim. I had been patient for 20 years, and all it had gotten me was more contempt and more insults. Nothing was going to change unless I changed it. Her calling me a loser while living off the stability my quiet financial management provided snapped something fundamental inside me. I was done being the stable, reliable person who got no credit. I was done being looked down on by someone who had no idea what I was really worth. I was done accepting contempt from someone who should have been grateful for everything I contributed. I made a decision sitting in that study looking at those account statements. I was going to leave. I was going to take my $1.8 million and disappear and file for divorce. I was going to show her exactly what she lost when she decided I was not worth respecting. Tomorrow morning, I would be gone, and she would finally understand what a mistake she had made. I woke up at 5 in the morning while my wife was still sleeping soundly in our bed. She had come home late from drinks with her friends and had gone straight to bed without speaking to me. She was probably still drunk and would sleep for several more hours. This was perfect timing for what I needed to do. I got dressed quietly in clothes I had set aside the night before. I moved carefully through the house, trying not to make any noise that would wake her. I had packed a single suitcase with essential items the night before and hidden it in my car. The suitcase contained clothes and toiletries and important documents like my birth certificate and passport. I did not pack much because I did not need much. I was about to have access to $1.8 million. I could buy whatever I needed once I got to where I was going. The important thing was to leave quickly and quietly before my wife woke up and realized what was happening. I drove to a bank branch in a neighboring town that opened early for business customers. I used my ATM card linked to one of my secret accounts to withdraw $50,000 in cash. The machine had a high daily limit for premium accounts, and mine qualified. I made multiple transactions, pulling out the maximum each time until I had a stack of bills that I put in an envelope. The cash would cover my immediate expenses while I got settled somewhere new. I drove to a storage facility where I had been keeping copies of important financial documents in a secure unit. I retrieved the documents I would need, including account statements and investment records and legal papers related to the trust. I put everything in a briefcase I had brought with me. Then I closed the storage unit and drove away, knowing I would never come back to this town again. By 9 in the morning, I was meeting with a lawyer in a city 2 hours away. I had made the appointment weeks ago when I first started planning my exit strategy. The lawyer specialized in divorce cases and asset protection. I explained my situation and showed him the prenuptial agreement my wife and I had signed before we got married. She had insisted on the prenup back when she was starting her business because she wanted to protect her future assets. The irony was, the prenup also protected my separate assets, including my inheritance. The lawyer reviewed all my documents and confirmed what I already knew. The inheritance money and everything I had built from it was completely separate from marital assets. My wife had no legal claim to any of it. The prenup we signed made it clear that assets acquired through inheritance or kept in separate accounts would remain individual property. My wife could not touch my $1.8 million, no matter how much she wanted to. Before I left the lawyer's office, I signed papers authorizing him to file for legal separation immediately. I also left instructions for serving my wife with divorce papers within the next few days. I wanted everything done quickly and decisively. I did not want to drag this out or give her time to mount some kind of legal challenge. The lawyer said he would handle everything and keep me updated on the progress. I drove back toward my house one last time to leave something for my wife to find. I knew she would be awake by now and probably wondering where I was. I parked down the street and walked to the house. I quietly entered through the garage and went to the kitchen. My wife was still upstairs. I could hear the shower running. I had a few minutes. I placed the divorce papers on the kitchen table where she would see them immediately. On top of the papers, I stuck a note I had written the night before. The note said the loser is taking his $1.8 million and filing for divorce. I said the house is in your name and you earned it with your contempt. I said, enjoy your success alone. Then I walked out of the house for the last time and got in my car and drove away from 20 years of marriage without looking back. By 9:30 that morning, I had transferred all $1.8 million to new accounts I had opened at a bank in a different state. I had researched everything carefully and chosen a state with strong asset protection laws. I opened the accounts online the week before using my laptop at a coffee shop far from home. Now I was moving the money from the old trust accounts into the new accounts where my wife would never be able to find it or touch it. The transfers were done electronically and took less than an hour to complete. I watched the balances in my old accounts drop to zero and the balances in my new accounts climb to over $1.8 million. Every penny was now completely out of reach from my wife and any lawyer she might hire. The money had always been mine legally, but now it was also physically separated and protected in accounts she did not know existed in a state where she had no jurisdiction. I consulted with my divorce lawyer by phone at noon to confirm everything was proceeding according to plan. He said the legal separation papers had been filed with the court that morning. He said my wife would be served with the papers within 48 hours. He confirmed again that all my inheritance money and the investments I had made with it were protected as separate property under our prenuptial agreement. She would have no legal claim to any of it. By 2 in the afternoon, I had officially started the legal process to end my marriage. The paperwork was filed, the assets were secured, the money was transferred. Everything I owned was now safely protected from my wife, who still had no idea what was happening. She probably thought I had just gone out for the day. She had no idea I was gone permanently and taking nearly $2 million with her. Every dollar of that $1.8 million had been mine before our marriage through my uncle's inheritance. I had kept it legally separate exactly as the trust required. I had never commingled those funds with our joint accounts or marital assets. I had been meticulous about keeping everything documented and separated. My wife had signed a prenuptial agreement that explicitly protected separate property and inheritance assets. She had insisted on that prenup to protect her business, but it was now protecting my wealth from her. The lawyer explained that even if my wife tried to argue she deserved some of the money because we were married when I invested it, she would lose. The law was clear that inheritance money kept in separate accounts remains separate property. The fact that I had grown the inheritance through investments did not change that. The returns on separate property remain separate property as long as they are kept in separate accounts, which I had done perfectly. My wife had no claim to my money. She had no access to my accounts. She had no way to freeze or seize any of my assets. Everything was mine, legally and practically. She could hire the best lawyers in the country, and they would all tell her the same thing. The prenup she insisted on signing had locked her out of my inheritance money completely. The irony was almost funny, except it was too sad to laugh about. I spent the afternoon driving to the small coastal town where I had decided to start my new life. I had researched the area for weeks and found a short-term rental I could move into immediately. The town was far from where my wife and I had lived. It was quiet and peaceful with beautiful ocean views. It was the kind of place where I could disappear and start over without anyone from my old life finding me. I checked into the rental and unpacked my single suitcase. I sat on the balcony overlooking the ocean and felt a sense of freedom I had not experienced in years. I was free from my wife's contempt. I was free from her insults and her dismissive treatment. I was free from trying to earn respect from someone who would never give it. And I had $1.8 million to build whatever life I wanted going forward. Her calls started around 3 in the afternoon that first day. My phone started buzzing with her number over and over. I watched it ring without answering. She called 27 times in the first hour alone. Each time it went to voicemail. I could see the voicemail notifications piling up, but I did not listen to any of them. I knew what they would say, and I had no interest in hearing her voice or her excuses or her demands that I come home. Finally, after the calls stopped for a few minutes, I decided to listen to the voicemails just to see how she was reacting. The first few messages were angry and indignant. She demanded to know where I was and what I thought I was doing leaving divorce papers on the kitchen table. She said I had no right to just walk out without discussing it with her first. She said I was being childish and dramatic. She said I needed to come home immediately so we could talk about this like adults. The messages in the middle showed confusion starting to set in. She said she did not understand what I meant about $1.8 million. She said that made no sense because she knew exactly how much money we had, and it was nowhere near that amount. She demanded to know where this money came from and why she did not know about it. Her voice was getting higher and more frantic as she talked. She was starting to realize there was something major she did not know about. The later messages showed desperate pleading. She said, "Please come home so we could talk about this." She said she was sorry for what she said the night before, and she had not meant it. She said she had been stressed and tired and took it out on me unfairly. She said we could work through this if I would just come back and communicate with her. Her voice was shaking, and she sounded on the verge of crying. The anger was gone, and panic had replaced it. Her text messages followed the same evolution from anger to confusion to desperation. The early texts said things like, "How dare you leave, and you are making a huge mistake, and this is ridiculous." Then the texts started asking questions. "Where did this money come from? What are you talking about? Why did not you tell me? What is going on?" Then the texts became pleading. "Please answer your phone. Please come home. We need to talk. I am sorry. Please." I found out later from my lawyer that she had called multiple attorneys that afternoon trying to find someone who could tell her she had rights to my money. Every lawyer she spoke to asked to see the prenuptial agreement. When she showed it to them, they all told her the same thing. The prenup protected separate property and inheritance assets. If her husband had money from an inheritance that he kept in separate accounts, she had no legal claim to it. The prenup she had insisted on signing was ironclad. One lawyer apparently told her that prenups designed to protect business assets work both ways. She had wanted to protect her business income and assets from me, but the same language that protected her assets also protected mine. She had never imagined I would have substantial assets to protect because she thought I was just a regular accountant with a modest salary. The prenup she was so proud of signing had locked her out of nearly $2 million she did not know existed. She called my lawyer's office multiple times that day, trying to get information about where I was and what I was planning. My lawyer's receptionist told her they could not discuss client matters with her. She demanded to speak to the lawyer directly. When he finally took her call, he confirmed that separation papers had been filed and that she would be served officially within 48 hours. He said any communication should go through her attorney. She apparently started crying on the phone and begging him to tell me to call her. I ignored all of it. Her panic and her tears and her desperate attempts to reach me meant nothing. She had spent years treating me with contempt, and now she was panicking because she realized the loser she married was actually worth more than she was. Within days, the truth about my hidden wealth had spread through my wife's social circle. She had apparently called her friends in a panic, asking for advice and telling them about the divorce papers and the money she never knew I had. Her friends being the gossipy group, they were immediately told other people. The story spread quickly through the network of colleagues and acquaintances my wife had spent years impressing with her success. Her friends and colleagues learned that the loser husband she had openly mocked for years had secretly been wealthy the entire time. They learned that while she was bragging about her income and her business success, her husband had been sitting on nearly $2 million. They learned that the man she introduced as just my husband with a dismissive wave had more money than most of them would ever see. The revelation was humiliating for her on every level. Her family learned the truth as well, and they were shocked. My wife had apparently told them over the years that she was the successful one in our marriage and that I was just a regular accountant who made decent money, but nothing special. She had positioned herself as the breadwinner and the ambitious partner who carried the financial weight. Now her family was learning that I had $1.8 million she never knew about, and that I had kept it secret for 15 years. The people at her office and her business associates heard about it too. My wife worked in a field where image and perception mattered a lot. She had built a reputation as a successful self-made businesswoman. Part of that image involved having a less successful husband who she could subtly look down on. It made her look even more impressive by comparison. But now everyone knew the husband she looked down on was actually wealthier than her and had been the whole time. The humiliation my wife experienced was public and complete. People who had heard her make dismissive comments about me over the years now knew those comments were based on completely false assumptions. People who had heard her complain about my lack of ambition now knew I had been ambitious enough to grow an inheritance into nearly $2 million. People who had pitied her for being married to someone so mediocre now realized she had been the one who was actually blind and foolish. Some of her friends apparently reached out to tell her she had made a terrible mistake. They said she should have appreciated what she had instead of constantly looking for reasons to feel superior. They said she had destroyed her marriage over her own arrogance and contempt. They said any woman would be lucky to have a husband who was financially stable and faithful and supportive, even if he was not flashy about his success. She had thrown away a good man because she was too busy looking down on him to see his actual worth. Her colleagues who had successful husbands apparently made comments about how their husbands were not worth nearly $2 million, despite their impressive titles and careers. They pointed out that quiet wealth is often more substantial than loud success. They said my wife had been so focused on appearances and status that she missed the fact that her modest accountant husband was wealthier than most of the flashy executives she admired. The comparison was not flattering to her. The truth my wife faced was devastating to her self-image and her social standing. She had spent years building a persona as a successful woman who had overcome the limitation of a mediocre husband. She had used me as a prop to make herself look better by comparison. She had made sure everyone knew she was the accomplished one in our relationship. And now everyone knew that narrative was completely false. She had been married to a wealthy man and been too arrogant to realize it. Her humiliation was entirely self-inflicted. Nobody had forced her to mock me or treat me with contempt. Nobody had made her call me a loser or tell me she was embarrassed to call me her husband. She had chosen to be cruel and dismissive. And now she was facing the consequences of that cruelty in the most public way possible. Everyone she knew was talking about how badly she had misjudged and mistreated her husband. I live now in a peaceful coastal town, far from my old life and far from my wife's voice and her venom. I wake up every morning to the sound of waves, and I spend my days doing whatever I want without anyone making me feel inadequate or worthless. The $1.8 million gives me complete financial freedom. I do not need to work unless I want to. I can travel anywhere I choose. I can buy what I need without worrying about budgets or justifying my purchases to someone who thinks I am a failure. I bought a small house overlooking the ocean with a view that takes my breath away every time I look at it. The house is modest but comfortable, and it is entirely mine. Nobody can make me feel unwelcome in my own home. Nobody can roll their eyes at me or dismiss what I say. I furnished it simply with things I actually like instead of things chosen to impress other people. Every corner of this house reflects my choices and my taste and my freedom from someone else's judgment. I travel when I feel like it without asking permission or coordinating schedules with someone who thinks spending time with me is a burden. I have visited places I always wanted to see but never could because my wife was too busy with her career or too uninterested in doing things with me. I take short trips and long trips, and I enjoy every moment of being able to make these decisions independently. The money gives me options I never had when I was trying to live modestly to protect my secret. I have peace for the first time in years. I do not wake up dreading the next insult or dismissive comment. I do not spend my days wondering what I did wrong to make my wife treat me with such contempt. I do not lie awake at night questioning my worth or trying to figure out how to earn respect from someone who had decided I was not worthy of it. The constant stress and sadness that weighed on me during my marriage has lifted completely. My wife sends emails sometimes trying to reach me since I blocked her phone number. The emails are a mixture of apologies and accusations. Sometimes she says she is sorry and she understands now that she treated me badly. Sometimes she says I am cruel for abandoning her and taking money she deserved to know about. Sometimes she tries to guilt me by saying I owed her honesty about my finances. I never respond to any of the emails. I read them once and then delete them. She has nothing to say that I want to hear. Her apologies are meaningless because they only came after she learned about the money. If I had been actually poor like she thought, she would still be treating me with contempt. Her accusations are ridiculous because I owed her nothing after the way she treated me. Her attempts to claim she deserved to know about the money ignore the fact that she spent years calling me a loser. Why would I share anything with someone who had such little respect for me? The divorce was finalized 6 months after I left. My wife tried to delay it and fight certain terms, but ultimately the prenup made everything very clear. We split the marital assets, which were minimal. She kept the house, which was in her name, and her business, which I had no claim to. I kept my inheritance and all the investments I had made with it. We each walked away with what was legally ours. She got her success and her career and her contempt. I got my freedom and my peace and my $1.8 million. She called me a loser, one time too many. She said I never accomplished anything and she was embarrassed by me. So I disappeared with my fortune and left her with nothing but the truth that she had lost the only thing worth keeping. She had lost a faithful partner who supported her for 20 years. She had lost a financially stable husband who turned out to be wealthy. She had lost someone who loved her despite her growing cruelty. And she lost all of it because she decided quiet strength and hidden success were not worth respecting. Turns out the loser was the only one smart enough to leave.